The Tueur, Heir's Secret, a love story of redemption. The wedding, the deadly silence took over the Chateau Valois. 400 guests held their breath as Eleanor Hayes, radiant in her French lace gown, extended her trembling hand to receive the wedding band. Marcus Chevalier, the heir to a billion-dollar empire, held the diamond ring as if it were poison. His dark eyes pierced her like blades of ice. Then, in front of all of Paris's elite, his voice echoed, cruel and relentless, through the golden halls. "I will never love you, Eleanor. This contract is only to save your family from total ruin. Don't be fooled into thinking this is a fairy tale." The ring fell onto the marble with a metallic clang. Silent tears streamed down her face. No one in the room could breathe. But behind that calculated cruelty, something was hidden in Marcus's eyes, something he himself didn't understand. A love story was about to be born from the ashes of the deepest humiliation. The scent of white roses and Dom Perignon champagne should have created the perfect atmosphere for the wedding of the century. Instead, the air in Chateau Valois was thick with tension, as if a storm was approaching the golden hills of Bordeaux. Eleanor Hayes adjusted the pearls around her neck with fingers that trembled imperceptibly. The Venetian mirror reflected a bride of ethereal beauty, with golden brown hair tied in an elegant bun, skin like porcelain, and green eyes that shone with contained tears. The Alençon lace dress, an exclusive creation from the House of Chanel, hugged her curves like a second skin. But she felt like a doll dressed for a ritual sacrifice. "Mademoiselle, it's time," whispered her companion, avoiding the bride's gaze. Through the windows of the bridal suite, Eleanor could see the perfectly manicured French gardens, where 400 guests waited under white silk marquees. The European elite had gathered to witness the union between the ruined daughter of the Hayes family and the ruthless heir of the Chevalier Empire. Swiss bankers chatted with Italian duchesses, while Russian tycoons toasted with Baccarat crystal. But Eleanor knew the truth behind all that ostentation. She was not a bride. She was a bargaining chip. 3 months earlier, when the creditors knocked on the door of the Hayes estate, her father had begged on his knees. The 30 million debt had swallowed not only the family fortune, but also the dignity of generations of French aristocrats. Marcus Chevalier appeared as a dark savior, offering to pay off the debts in full in exchange for something he considered even more valuable, a wife of noble lineage to legitimize his new money. "He is a cold man, ma chérie," her mother, Mrs. Hayes, had whispered days earlier, "but maybe you can awaken his heart." Eleanor descended the Carrara marble staircase as if she were walking to her own execution. The chateau's halls echoed with the expectant murmuring of the guests. Bohemian crystal chandeliers projected golden rainbows over paintings by French masters, while arrangements of white peonies perfumed the air with an almost suffocating sweetness. At the entrance to the main hall, she paused. Through the double doors of carved oak, she could see Marcus Chevalier waiting at the improvised altar in front of the ancestral stone fireplace. Even from a distance, his presence dominated the room. 190 centimeters tall, with broad shoulders, under a perfectly tailored Armani tuxedo, and black hair combed back, revealing an aristocratic forehead. At 35, he was considered one of the most desired men in Europe, but also one of the most ruthless. The doors opened, and the string quartet began Mendelssohn's Wedding March. Eleanor forced a radiant smile and began to walk down the aisle of rose petals, feeling the weight of 400 pairs of eyes on her. Courteous whispers echoed in French, English, and Italian. "She is even more beautiful than in the magazines." Poor child. She doesn't know what she's getting herself into. Chevalier has destroyed men stronger than her. Each step on the ancestral Persian carpet brought her closer to Marcus, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze piercing her soul. There was no warmth in those bitter chocolate-colored eyes, only cold calculation and something that seemed almost like contempt. When she finally reached the altar, he did not extend his hand to help her up the 2 marble steps. Instead, he watched her with the same expression he would use to evaluate a racehorse at an auction. Father Michael, a family friend of the Chevaliers for decades, began the ceremony in a solemn voice. The sacred words echoed through the hall as Eleanor struggled to maintain her composure. When the time came for the rings, Marcus picked up the diamond ring, a Cartier piece valued at 200,000 euros, and held it between his fingers as if it were a weighty decision. "Marcus Chevalier," the priest said, "do you take Eleanor Hayes as your wife, to love and respect her in wealth and poverty, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Eleanor could hear her own heart beating like war drums. The guests leaned forward, expectant. Then Marcus smiled. It was not a smile of happiness, but something sharp and cruel that turned his aristocratic face into a mask of ice. "I do," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a sentence. "But let it be clear to everyone present." He raised his voice, making sure every word reached the farthest corners of the room. The whispers stopped. Even the wind at the window seemed to stop blowing. "I will never love you, Eleanor. This contract is only to save your family from total ruin. Don't be fooled into thinking this is a fairy tale. You will be my wife only on paper, a beautiful doll for social events, nothing more." The diamond ring slipped from his fingers and fell onto the marble with a metallic clang that reverberated through the deadly silence. 400 people watched, paralyzed, at the most public humiliation in French high society in decades. Tears welled up in Eleanor's green eyes, but she kept her chin up. In that moment of absolute devastation, something awakened inside her. Not the fragility of a victim, but the ancestral strength of the Hayes women who had faced revolutions and wars. "I understand perfectly, Monsieur Chevalier," she replied, her voice crystalline, echoing with a dignity that surprised even herself. "But know that, although I accepted this agreement to save my family, my heart remains my own. And one day you may discover that there are things in this world that your money cannot buy." She bent down gracefully, picked the ring up from the floor, and placed it on her own finger, without waiting for him to do it. The gesture was so elegant and defiant that a murmur of admiration ran through the crowd. Marcus watched her with something new in his eyes. Surprise? Respect? Or perhaps just irritation that she had turned the tables on her own terms? "You may kiss the bride now," said Father Michael, clearly uncomfortable with the palpable tension. Marcus approached, but the kiss was ceremonial, cold as the marble beneath their feet. Still, when his lips touched hers for those few seconds, Eleanor felt an electrical current run down her spine, and was sure that he felt it too. The applause was polite, but hesitant. Mrs. Vanderbilt whispered something to Countess de Polignac, while Lord Wellington shook his head in disapproval. The orchestra began a waltz, but the atmosphere remained charged. Like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of love and redemption. And tell us in the comments what you think Eleanor will do next. Will she fight for his heart? Or will she simply leave him and start over? During the reception in the gardens, lit by thousands of golden lights, Eleanor smiled and greeted guests as if her world had not collapsed an hour before. Marcus remained by her side, playing the part of a courteous husband for the cameras and curious glances, but whispering cutting comments whenever no one could hear them. "Your performance was convincing," he murmured as they toasted with Krug champagne. "But don't forget, this is just theater." "Theater?" Eleanor tilted her head, an enigmatic smile playing on her lips. Interesting, because from what I've observed today, you're also playing a role, Monsieur Chevalier. The question is, who is the real Marcus behind this mask of cruelty? For the first time that day, he seemed genuinely disarmed. When the night came to an end, and the last guests departed in their Rolls-Royces and Bentleys, Eleanor found herself alone in the chateau's master bedroom. Marcus had made it clear that he would sleep in the office. Even on their honeymoon, he would keep his distance. She sat down in front of the antique dressing table and removed the pearls one by one, watching her reflection in the mirror. The young woman who looked back was no longer the same one who had woken up that morning. Something had been born inside her during that public humiliation, a fierce determination she didn't even know she possessed. "You may have bought my name, Marcus Chevalier," she whispered to the empty room. "But my heart is a prize you will have to win, and something tells me this war is just beginning." Outside, in the office windows, a light remained on until dawn. Marcus Chevalier also couldn't sleep, tormented by something he couldn't name. Perhaps the echo of a dignity he hadn't expected to find, or the first tremor in the walls he had built to protect a heart that had once been broken. The pre-dawn wind carried the scent of Bordeaux vines, whispering promises of a story that was just beginning to unfold. London shone like a diamond under the September sun. But Eleanor watched the city through the armored windows of her penthouse in Knightsbridge, as if she were contemplating a golden cage. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, and she still felt like a stranger, wandering through the corridors of her own life. Marcus's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a restored Victorian building, with a panoramic view of the London skyline and Hyde Park. Every detail screamed refined luxury. Calacatta marble floors, 18th century French furniture, works by Monet and Renoir on the walls, as if they were simple decorations. But all that beauty felt cold and soulless, just like her husband. Marcus left for the office at 7 in the morning in his black Aston Martin, and only returned after 11 at night, when she had already retired to the guest bedroom that had become her refuge. They shared the same roof, but lived as polite strangers, who occasionally crossed paths in the corridors. "Madame Chevalier," said Françoise, the 50-year-old housekeeper who managed the house with military efficiency. "The master left instructions for you to choose a personal trainer and a language tutor. He wishes you to improve yourself." Eleanor almost laughed at the irony. Marcus wanted to mold her into his perfect version of a trophy wife, as if she were clay in the hands of an arrogant sculptor. "Tell my husband I appreciate the thought," she replied. "But I prefer to explore London alone. It's been 3 years since I've set foot in this city." The truth was that she needed to breathe, needed to feel that she still had some control over her own existence. She put on a nude Hermès outfit, one of dozens of clothes that magically appeared in her closet after the wedding, and went out to walk the streets she once knew so well. The London of her childhood had been different. She used to run through Hyde Park with other children from high society, attended the best private schools, and dreamed of a brilliant future. Now, walking past Harrods, each window of the designer boutiques reminded her that all that wealth around her had a price, and she was that price. It was in a small bookstore in Notting Hill that she found refuge. Among shelves of old books and the scent of aged paper, Eleanor could pretend she was just a young Londoner in search of a good story. She chose a copy of Pride and Prejudice, ironic considering her own situation, and settled into a burgundy velvet armchair near the window. "Excuse me," a man's voice said in a soft English accent. "Aren't you Eleanor Chevalier?" She looked up and found a man of about 40, with brown hair and graying temples, and kind blue eyes. There was something familiar about his face, but she couldn't place it. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Dr. Julian Thorne," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm a doctor at St. Thomas's Hospital. I've known Marcus for many years." The name brought back a vague memory. She had heard Marcus mention that name on the phone, always in a different, less cold, more human tone. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Thorne." "Julian, please." He hesitated, as if debating internally. "Forgive my rudeness, but how are you? I know the wedding was intense." The unexpected kindness almost made her fall apart. For 3 weeks, no one had asked her how she really was. Everyone assumed she should be ecstatic to have married one of the richest men in France. "I'm adapting," she replied diplomatically. Julian studied her face with the keen perception of a doctor accustomed to reading beyond words. "Marcus wasn't always like this," he said softly. "The man you met at the altar isn't who he really is, or rather, isn't who he was." "What do you mean?" "5 years ago, he lost someone very important. Since then," Julian shook his head, "he's built walls so high that sometimes I wonder if he even remembers what he was like before." Before Eleanor could ask more questions, Julian's phone rang. It was an emergency at the hospital. He said goodbye quickly, but not before leaving something that deeply intrigued her. "Eleanor, I know you don't know me, but can I give you a piece of advice? Don't give up on him yet. Behind all that coldness, there is a man who once knew how to love with an intensity that scared everyone who knew him. Maybe you are the only person capable of reminding him of that." Back at the penthouse, Eleanor found Marcus in his office, working even though it was a Saturday afternoon. Through the ajar door, she could see him hunched over contracts, the muscles in his back tense under the white linen shirt. For a moment, she hesitated. Julian's words echoed in her mind. She knocked gently on the door. "Come in," he said, without looking up from the papers. "Marcus, I'd like to talk to you. If it's about money for shopping, talk to Françoise. She has access to the card I set aside for your expenses." "It's not about money." Eleanor entered the office, noticing the details for the first time. Walls lined with dark wood, a 19th century mahogany desk, shelves filled with corporate law books, and, curiously, some volumes of French poetry. He finally looked up, and she was surprised to notice the dark shadows under his eyes. When was the last time he had a good night's sleep? "So, what is it about? About us? About this marriage? I know you made your expectations clear, but I have some too. I want to work. I have a degree in art history from the Sorbonne and experience in curating. I can't just stay here as an expensive ornament." "Absolutely not." The answer was immediate and categorical. "My wife doesn't need to work. It would be embarrassing for my reputation." "Your reputation?" Eleanor's voice went up an octave. "What about my dignity, my sanity? Or does that not matter as long as I smile pretty at your business parties?" Something flashed in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or something deeper. "You don't understand the world you live in now, Eleanor. There are rules and expectations. My first wife." He stopped abruptly, as if he had revealed something he didn't intend to. "Your first wife?" Eleanor's heart raced. No one had mentioned he had been married before. Marcus got up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the Thames. For long minutes, he was silent, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "She died," he said finally, his voice almost a whisper, "in a car accident, when she was returning from an art exhibition that I had forbidden her from organizing. If she had stayed home that night." The pain in his voice was so real, so raw, that Eleanor felt her chest tighten. Without thinking, she approached and lightly touched his arm. "Marcus, He pulled away, as if her touch burned. "No." His voice returned to its icy tone. "I don't want your pity, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes that Catherine made. You will stay home, safe, and that is my final word on the matter." He left the office, leaving Eleanor alone among the shadows of the evening. But now she understood something fundamental. Marcus's cruelty was not born of malice, but of a pain so deep that he had chosen coldness as his only form of protection. That night, she dined alone in the formal dining room, under the gaze of ancestral chevalier portraits. The silence was broken only by the delicate clinking of Limoges porcelain and the distant sound of Parisian traffic 15 stories below. At 11:30 at night, she heard a key in the lock. Marcus had returned, as always, when he thought she would already be asleep. But this time, Eleanor waited in the hallway. "Good evening," she said softly when he passed. He stopped, surprised to find her awake. "Why aren't you sleeping?" "I was thinking about Catherine." The name of his first wife hit him like a punch. His muscles tensed visibly. "Don't say that name." Was she also a gilded prisoner in this beautiful cage? Eleanor kept her voice gentle, without accusation. "Or did you really love her before you decided that loving hurts too much?" For a moment that lasted an eternity, they looked at each other in the dimly lit hallway. Eleanor could see the battle raging on his face between the man he was and the man he had chosen to become. "Good night, Eleanor," he said finally, but his voice had lost its usual harshness. As she watched him disappear down the hallway, Eleanor knew she had found the first crack in Marcus Chevalier's impenetrable armor. And as painful as it was, she was determined to discover what man was hiding behind so much fear and coldness. The war between them had officially begun, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance that both of them would emerge victorious in the end. What do you think is driving Marcus? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more. The Montclair Chalet in Aspen looked like something out of an alpine fairy tale. Dark, hand-carved wood, ancestral stones, and windows that framed the snowy peaks of the Rocky Mountains like living paintings. Eleanor had never seen so much wild beauty concentrated in one place, or felt so much fear and expectation running through her veins. December had arrived with a blizzard that isolated the chalet from the rest of the world. The roads were impassable, the phones had no signal, and for the first time in 2 months of marriage, she and Marcus were truly alone. No housekeepers, no business meetings, no excuses to avoid what had been growing between them since that stormy night in Cannes. "The forecast is for the storm to last at least 3 days, Marcus informed her, turning off the radio in the gourmet kitchen. He had swapped his Italian suits for a black cashmere sweater and wool pants, and Eleanor discovered that this more casual version of him was even more dangerous to her self-control. 3 days, she repeated, pretending to study the snowflakes dancing beyond the panoramic windows. "I imagine we'll survive." "Eleanor." His voice had that low, dangerous tone that made her stomach tighten. "About what happened in Cannes. Are you going to pretend it didn't happen?" She turned to face him, her green eyes shining with determination. "Are you going to go back to treating me like an elegant ghost wandering through your house?" Marcus approached slowly, like a predator studying its prey. When he stopped just a step away, Eleanor could feel the warmth emanating from his body and the woody scent of his perfume, mixed with the smell of burning wood in the fireplace. "You don't understand the risk you're taking," he murmured, raising his hand to touch a golden lock that had escaped her ponytail. "When I love completely, possessively. Catherine used to say it was suffocating. And what if I don't care about that?" His eyes darkened. Then you're more dangerous than I imagined. The kitchen of the chalet became an emotional battlefield. They prepared dinner together, she cutting vegetables with surgical precision, while he prepared a beef bourguignon with the concentration of a professional chef. It was domestic and intimate in a way that neither of them had anticipated. "Where did you learn to cook?" Eleanor asked, watching him add red wine to the pan with fluid movements. "Catherine insisted that we cook together on weekends." His voice carried nostalgia, but for the first time, there was no sharp pain when he said his first wife's name. "She used to say that no matter how many chefs we had, some things needed to be done with our own hands." She was right? Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at her intensely. "Don't you feel jealous of her?" "How can I feel jealous of a woman who taught you how to love?" Eleanor held his gaze. "Catherine was part of who you are. To pretend she didn't exist would be to pretend that half of your soul doesn't exist." Something changed in his face at that moment. The hard lines around his eyes softened, and for the first time, Eleanor saw the man he had been before the tragedy. Kind, passionate, capable of a breathtaking tenderness. They had dinner by candlelight in front of the crackling fireplace, talking about books, trips, and dreams they had kept in the dusty drawers of their hearts. Eleanor discovered that Marcus had studied architecture before taking over the family business, and that he secretly dreamed of designing sustainable homes for underprivileged communities. "Why did you never do it?" she asked. "Because dreams are luxuries that men like me can't afford." He swirled the wine in his glass, watching the red liquid catch the golden light of the fire. "My father taught me that feelings are weaknesses, that love is a dangerous distraction." "And you believe that?" "I did." He looked at her through the flames of the candle, "until you came into my life and complicated everything." After dinner, she offered to wash the dishes, but he stopped her with a gentle touch on her wrist. "Leave it. I'll do it." Eleanor settled into the living room, watching him through the archway that separated the rooms. There was something hypnotic about the way he took care of simple things, drying each plate with meticulous attention, putting everything back in its exact place. It was like watching a meditation ritual. "Marcus," she called softly, "play the piano for me." He paused with a crystal glass halfway to the shelf. "Why?" "Because when you play, I can see who you really are." The chalet's piano was a smaller Austrian Bosendorfer than the Steinway in London, but with a warmer, more intimate tone. Marcus sat down on the navy velvet bench and let his fingers find the keys as if they were old friends. This time, he chose Debussy's Clair de Lune. The melody floated through the room like liquid silk, mixing with the sound of the snow hitting the windows and the hypnotic crackling of the firewood. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the music, feeling as if she were being transported to a world where only beauty and emotion mattered. When the last note dissipated in the air, she opened her eyes and found Marcus watching her with an intensity that made her blush. "Catherine used to sit exactly where you are," he said, with the same expression of peace on her face. Instead of shying away from the comparison, Eleanor got up and walked to the piano. "Then maybe she's trying to tell us something." "Eleanor, shh." She placed her finger on his lips. "Don't think. For one night, just feel." What happened next was inevitable, like the rising of the sun. Marcus pulled her onto his lap on the piano bench, and this time, when they kissed, there was no external storm to blame, only the storm that raged inside their hearts. His hands explored her face as if he were memorizing every curve, every texture. Eleanor's fingers became entangled in his dark hair, marveling at its silky softness. It was as if they were getting to know each other for the first time, not as a forced husband and wife, but as a man and woman choosing to surrender to the inevitable. I didn't want it to be like this, he whispered against her lips. I didn't want to feel this for you. Why not? Because when I love, I give everything, and I'm afraid that everything won't be enough for you. Eleanor held his face in her hands, forcing him to maintain eye contact. Marcus Chevalier, you are the most stubborn, proud, and frustratingly complex man I have ever met. But you are also the man who plays Chopin in the middle of the night, who cooks with his own hands, and who carries the weight of the world on his shoulders because he refuses to show weakness. I don't want half of you. I want all of you, including the baggage, the fears, and the scars. He carried her to the master bedroom as if she were made of Venetian crystal. The four-poster bed, with burgundy velvet curtains, waited for them under the soft light of the crystal lamps. Outside, the blizzard continued, but inside the warm chalet, two wounded souls found refuge in each other. They made love for the first time, not with the wild passion of the movies, but with a devastating tenderness that spoke of hearts recognizing each other after a lifetime of loneliness. Afterward, while Eleanor slept nestled in his arms, Marcus remained awake, watching the snowflakes dance beyond the window. For the first time in 5 years, the constant weight on his chest had been relieved. But along with the relief came a renewed terror, because now he had something precious to lose again. And this time, he wasn't sure he would survive the loss. Do you think Eleanor and Marcus can overcome their past to build a real future together? Let us know your opinion in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little hope. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. A New Beginning. Year later, Chateau Valois was unrecognizable. The same golden halls that had witnessed humiliation and coldness now shone with a different light. The light of true love that had flourished against all odds. Eleanor woke up in the master suite, no longer in the guest bedroom, with the September sun filtering through the French silk curtains. Beside her, Marcus slept with an expression of peace that she had learned to love in recent months. His dark hair fell over his forehead, and she resisted the urge to brush it back with her fingers. Today would be the day of their vow renewal, an intimate ceremony that had been his idea, not hers. I want to erase those cruel words, he had said 2 weeks earlier, holding her against his chest after they had made love in the London penthouse. I want the world to know that you are not just my wife on paper. You are the woman who brought my heart back to life. The transformation of Marcus in recent months had been gradual, but profound. The man who once forbade everything out of fear had become her biggest supporter when she opened her own art gallery in Notting Hill. He attended every opening, proud and protective, but without ever trying to control her decisions. "Good morning, my star," his husky voice murmured against her neck. "Good morning, my love," she replied, turning to meet his eyes. They had developed this morning ritual, small declarations of love that healed a little more of the old wounds each day. Nervous? Should I be? Eleanor traced lazy circles on his bare chest. After all, I've been married to you for a year. But today is different. Marcus captured her hand and kissed it softly. Today is when we truly choose each other. They had breakfast on the terrace that overlooked the gardens, where a small team was setting up the scenery for the ceremony. Only 20 people had been invited, close family and true friends. Dr. Julian Thorne would officiate the ceremony, honoring the friendship that had helped Marcus find his way back to the light. "Madame," Françoise interrupted, now with a genuine smile on her face, a dramatic change from the first tense months. "A special delivery has arrived for you." It was a navy velvet box with the Cartier emblem. Inside lay a set of sapphires and diamonds that took Eleanor's breath away. A necklace, earrings, and a bracelet that seemed to have captured pieces of the night sky. They are the jewels that belong to my grandmother, Marcus explained, watching her reaction. She wore them at her own wedding to my grandfather in 1940, right after the liberation of Paris. They were the only jewels that survived the war, hidden throughout the German occupation. Eleanor touched the precious stones with reverence. It wasn't just the monetary value that impressed her, but the emotional weight. He was sharing family history, traditions, the legacy of the Chevaliers that she was now truly a part of. They are beautiful, but at our first wedding, I wore my family's pearls. Today, I want to wear something that symbolizes our new beginning, not the past. Marcus smiled, that rare and devastating smile that completely transformed his face. Then wear this. He pulled a smaller box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate choker of white and yellow diamonds. Simple, but elegant. I had it made especially for today. The yellow diamonds came from a mine in South Africa that I just acquired. It's our first acquisition as a couple. Ours? Half of the company is yours now, officially. I want you to be my partner in everything. Business, life, dreams. He paused, vulnerable. If you want. In response, she kissed him with all the passion she felt right there on the terrace, not caring that the employees might see them. In the afternoon, Eleanor got dressed in the same room where she had cried tears of humiliation a year earlier. But this time, every gesture was an act of self-love and conscious choice. The dress was a creation in champagne silk from Valentino. Simple but elegant, it flowed like golden water around her body. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and Marcus's diamonds captured the light like stars caught in her throat. When she descended the staircase this time, there was no fear in her steps. Marcus was waiting for her in the same spot where he had uttered cruel words 12 months before, but now his eyes shone with an emotion she knew well. Deep, true, unconditional love. The guests were few but significant. Her parents, who had regained not only financial stability but also their dignity. Marcus's sister Celeste, who had become her best friend. Julian and his wife, Marie, and some close friends who had witnessed the couple's transformation. "My dear friends and family," began Julian, who had offered to officiate the ceremony. "We are here today to celebrate not only the union of Marcus and Eleanor, but also the birth of true love between two souls who found in each other the cure for old wounds." Marcus took Eleanor's hands, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. Nervousness, emotion, or perhaps just the magnitude of the moment. "Eleanor," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "A year ago, on these very stairs, I said words I am deeply ashamed of. Words born of fear, pain, and the cowardice of a man who had forgotten how to love without being afraid of losing. Tears began to well up in the eyes of the guests, but Eleanor kept her gaze fixed on her husband, drinking in every word like nectar. "You taught me that loving is not a weakness, but the greatest courage a person can have. You taught me that honoring the past doesn't mean living trapped in it. And you taught me that some miracles are worth all the risks." He knelt down. The proud Marcus Chevalier knelt before everyone present and took a new wedding band from his pocket. It was a platinum band, engraved with a line from Claire de Lune in musical notation. "So I ask you again in front of all we love, Eleanor Hayes, a Chevalier, do you accept to be my wife for real? Do you accept that I love you with all the intensity I am capable of? Do you accept to build with me not just a marriage, but a life full of shared dreams?" "I do," she whispered, her voice broken with emotion. "But only if you promise one thing. Anything. Promise that you will stop punishing yourself for the past and allow yourself to be happy with us, with our family to come." Marcus's eyes widened. "Family to come?" Eleanor smiled through her tears and placed a hand on her still flat stomach. 8 weeks, she whispered. I was going to tell you after the ceremony, but I couldn't wait. The silence that followed was completely different from that of a year ago. This time, it was the silence of absolute joy, of love that overflows and finds no words to express itself. Marcus slowly stood up, took her face in his hands, and kissed her with a tenderness that made all the guests cry openly. When they separated, he rested his forehead on hers. I love you, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I love your strength, your beauty, your courage to love me even when I didn't deserve it. And I love the miracle you're carrying. And I love you, she replied, exactly as you are. Scars, fears, and all the beauty you hide from the world. As they exchanged the new rings, the sun set over the vineyards of Bordeaux, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that rivaled the best impressionist paintings. The chamber orchestra began a waltz, and for the first time, Marcus and Eleanor danced as true lovers, lost in each other's eyes. You know what's ironic? Eleanor murmured as they twirled on the marble terrace. What? A year ago, you said this was no fairy tale. Marcus laughed, a genuine, youthful, liberated laugh. And I was right. This is much better than any fairy tale. This is real. Later, when the guests had left, and they were alone under the September stars, Marcus led Eleanor to the same spot where the ring had fallen to the floor a year earlier. I have a confession, he said, pulling her closer. What? That day, when I said I would never love you, a part of me already knew I was lying. Because in that moment, when you lifted your chin and defied me with such dignity, something inside me recognized something inside you. My soul recognized your soul. And that terrified me more than any business or financial risk I've ever faced. Eleanor smiled, remembering the terrified young woman who had walked down that hallway 12 months before. And now? Now I know that the greatest risk is not loving, he whispered, placing his hand on her belly where a new chevalier was growing. The greatest risk is to waste a single day without telling you how much I love you. They remained embraced under the French moonlight, surrounded by the gardens where their story had begun with pain and blossomed into true love. The wind carried the scent of roses and the promise of a future that finally seemed bright. Eleanor had entered that chateau as a desperate young woman, accepting a cruel agreement. Now, a year later, she was a fulfilled woman, deeply loved, and carrying the future of the Chevalier family in her womb. And Marcus, the man who had sworn never to love again, discovered that some walls are built to be torn down by the right person at the right time, with the right kind of love. Forever? He asked, echoing the words he hadn't been able to say a year before. Forever, she promised, sealing the pact with a kiss that tasted of redemption, hope, and all the happy endings that are worth waiting for. 10 years later, the aroma of fresh croissants and brewed coffee danced through the kitchen of Chateau Valois, mixing with the laughter of children and the distant sound of classical music coming from the conservatory that Eleanor had built in the east wing of the chateau. It was a perfect spring Saturday morning, and the Chevalier family was following its sacred weekend ritual. Eleanor, at 38, had become even more radiant with the passing years. Her golden hair now fell to her waist in natural waves, and her green eyes shone with the serenity of a completely fulfilled woman. She wore a white linen dress that floated around her legs as she prepared the special Saturday breakfast, a tradition that had begun in their second year of marriage and had become sacred to the family. "Mom, Leo is trying to put jam in my hair," protested Chloe, 8 years old, running into the kitchen with her bouncing brown curls and green eyes identical to her mother's, flashing with indignation. "Leo Chevalier," Eleanor called with that maternal tone that managed to be firm and playful at the same time. "You know very well that jam goes on toast, not on your sister's hair." A 9-year-old boy appeared at the kitchen door, trying to look innocent but failing miserably. Leo had inherited his father's dark eyes and mischievous personality, but his mother's gentle heart. His black hair was adorably disheveled, and his clothes already showed signs of his first morning adventure in the gardens. "Sorry, Mom," he murmured, but his eyes shone with barely contained fun. "But she said my drawing of the chateau looked like a doghouse." "Because it does!" Chloe shouted, crossing her thin arms. "Enfants," a deep, amused voice intervened from the door. Marcus entered carrying 3-year-old Ethan in his arms. The youngest had taken more after the Hayes side of the family, with light brown hair and eyes that changed between green and gold, depending on the light. "Your mother is trying to prepare our special breakfast, and you are making more noise than a badly tuned orchestra." "Dad!" Leo and Chloe shouted in unison, running to hug their father's legs. Marcus, at 45, had become even more attractive with maturity. Some silver streaks shone in his black hair, especially at the temples, and small smile lines marked the corners of his eyes, a transformation that never ceased to surprise Eleanor, considering how rarely he smiled in their first years of marriage. This Saturday, he wore dark jeans and a light blue linen shirt that brought out his eyes, looking more like a loving father than the ruthless magnate the business world still knew. "Good morning, my star," he murmured, approaching Eleanor to kiss her softly on the lips, a ritual they maintained religiously no matter how many children were watching. "Good morning, my love," she replied, caressing his face with tenderness. Even after 10 years, his touch still made her heart race as it had on the first day. "Yuck! Dad and Mom are kissing again," complained Ethan, making exaggerated faces that drew laughter from everyone present. "And we're going to keep kissing for the next 60 years, Marcus declared solemnly, "so you'd better get used to it." Breakfast was served in the conservatory, a magical space with a glass ceiling that allowed the morning sun to bathe the family in golden light. The rustic French table comfortably held the 5 members of the Chevalier family, surrounded by vases of white peonies and pink roses that Eleanor personally cultivated in the gardens. "Mom," said Chloe, smeared with raspberry jam up to her ears, "are you going to tell us the story of how you and Dad fell in love today?" It was a tradition that had begun when Leo turned 5 and asked why Dad sometimes looked at Mom as if she were made of starlight. Since then, every first Saturday of the month was dedicated to telling, in versions suitable for children, the story of how their parents met and fell in love. Eleanor and Marcus exchanged knowing glances. They had developed an edited version of the story that preserved the magic of true love without the darker details of their early days. "Once upon a time," Eleanor began in the melodic voice of a storyteller, "there was a young woman named Eleanor who thought she knew everything about love, and a stubborn man named Marcus who was sure he would never fall in love again." Marcus continued, entering the narrative they knew by heart. "They met at a very elegant wedding at a beautiful French chateau," Eleanor continued, her eyes shining as she remembered. "But Dad was very afraid of loving again, so he pretended he didn't like Mom. But Mom was smart and brave," Marcus added, smiling at his wife. "She saw through the mask that Dad was wearing and discovered that, deep down, he had a very big heart, full of love to give." "And then?" Ethan asked, listening to the story as if it were the first time, his eyes wide with fascination. Then, Dad learned that loving isn't scary when you find the right person, Eleanor finished. And Mom learned that sometimes the best treasures are hidden behind very high walls. And you lived happily ever after, Leo shouted, clapping his hands. No, Marcus corrected softly. We chose to live happily ever after. Every day we make the choice to love each other, take care of each other, and build a beautiful life together. Happily ever after doesn't happen by magic. It happens by choice. After breakfast, the family separated for their Saturday rituals. Leo and Chloe ran to the gardens where an elaborate playground had been built among the old rose bushes. Ethan, still too young for the adventures of his older siblings, settled in Eleanor's art studio with his crayons and paper, creating abstract drawings that always drew sincere praise from his parents. Eleanor and Marcus walked hand in hand to the small family cemetery at the back of the property, where a discreet marble headstone marked a special spot. Catherine Chevalier, beloved wife and mother, your memory lives on in our hearts. It was a ritual they had kept for years, visiting the grave of Marcus's first wife every first Saturday of the month, bringing fresh flowers and sharing news of the family she would never know. She would have loved the children, Eleanor said softly, arranging a bouquet of white lilies in the crystal vase. And you, Marcus replied, putting his arm around his wife's waist. Catherine always said she wanted me to find love again if something happened to her. I think she would have been happy knowing I found you. They remained in respectful silence for a few minutes, listening to the birds sing and the distant laughter of the children. There was no jealousy or discomfort in the dynamic. Eleanor genuinely felt gratitude for the woman who had loved Marcus first and taught him to have a heart big enough to love deeply. Marcus, Eleanor said after a while, I have some news. He turned to look at her, and something in her expression made him smile even before hearing the words. Again? Again, she laughed, placing her hand on her still flat belly. Dr. Lorraine confirmed it yesterday. 10 weeks. And Marcus twirled her in the air, laughing like a man completely free from the shadows of the past. 4 children, he murmured in awe. What an unexpected blessing. Aren't you worried? We already have our hands full with 3 little hurricanes. Worried? Marcus kissed her forehead tenderly. My star. Each child is a new chance to see the world through innocent eyes, and each pregnancy reminds me of the miracle it is to create life with the woman I love. They returned to the house hand in hand, passing through what was once a formal French garden, and now included a play area, an organic vegetable garden where the children learned about nature, and a small hedge maze that Leo loved to use for his detective games. The chateau itself had also changed over the years. The formal halls remained untouched for special occasions, but the house now breathed family life. Children's drawings decorated the walls of the main corridors. Small bicycles rested in the entrance hall, and the large music room had become a space where the whole family gathered to sing and dance on Sunday evenings. Dad! Chloe shouted, running toward her parents with a paper in her hand. Look what I drew. It was a portrait of the family, with disproportionate stick figures, but clearly recognizable. Marcus and Eleanor, holding hands in the center, surrounded by 3 smiling children, and a dog that they didn't yet have, but Chloe had included in the hope that it would become a reality. It's beautiful, ma petite artiste, Marcus said, kneeling to get to his daughter's height. We're going to frame it and put it on the dining room wall next to the famous paintings. Chloe's eyes widened. For real? Next to the real paintings? Of course, Eleanor intervened. Art made with love is always the most valuable. The rest of the day flowed with the chaotic naturalness of a large and happy family. There was an epic bubble battle in the gardens, followed by an impromptu picnic under the large centenary tree where Marcus had hung swings for the children. Leo showed off his progress on the violin. He had inherited his father's musical talent, while Chloe danced ballet on the soft grass, her graceful movements promising future talent. Ethan, still too small for organized activities, was happy exploring flowers, chasing butterflies, and collecting special pebbles that he insisted on showing to every member of the family. When the sun began to set over the Bordeaux vineyards, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that rivaled any masterpiece, the family gathered on the terrace for their end-of-day ritual. It was the moment when each member shared the best part of their day, a tradition that Eleanor had started to teach the children gratitude. My best part was when I managed to play the whole song without missing a single note, Leo declared proudly. Mine was when I found a ladybug with perfect spots, said Chloe, always dramatic. Butterfly, shouted Ethan, who was still learning to form complete sentences, but always participated enthusiastically. And you, Mom and Dad? Asked Leo. Marcus looked at Eleanor, and she nodded for him to go first. My best part was realizing that I'm going to have another little chevalier to love in a few months, he said, causing the children to let out cries of joy. Another baby! Chloe jumped up. Can I help choose the name? Of course, ma chérie, Eleanor laughed. And my best part was seeing your love when Dad told you the news. You make my heart explode with happiness every day. When the children were finally put to bed, Leo with his adventure book, Chloe with her favorite doll, and Ethan with his plush blanket, Marcus and Eleanor met in the place where everything had begun, the chateau's music room. The Steinway grand piano shone under the soft light of the crystal chandeliers. Eleanor settled into the burgundy velvet chaise longue, the same one where she used to sit in the first months of their marriage to hear Marcus play when he thought she didn't know. What music tonight? She asked, making herself comfortable. What would you like to hear, my star? Surprise me. Marcus smiled and let his fingers find the keys. But instead of the melancholy classical pieces he used to play in the early years, he chose something cheerful and hopeful, a Strauss waltz that echoed with promises of endless springs and new beginnings. Eleanor closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the music, remembering the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. From the terrified young woman who had walked down the aisle in a forced marriage to the fulfilled woman who now carried the fourth child of the man she loved more than life itself. What are you thinking about? Marcus asked when the music stopped. I was thinking about time, she replied, opening her eyes to meet his loving gaze. How funny it is that in 10 years we have lived several different lives. The scared Eleanor you met at the altar, the furious woman who challenged you in Paris, the passionate wife who discovered who you really were in Cannes. And now? Now we are the best version of ourselves. Parents, partners, lovers, best friends. She got up and went to the piano, sitting next to him on the bench. And you know what else? We still have so many future versions to discover. Marcus intertwined his fingers with hers over the keys. Tell me about the 60-year-old Eleanor. What will she be like? Eleanor laughed, imagining. She will have beautiful silver hair that she refuses to dye because you say it shines like stars. She will be a terrible grandmother who spoils her grandchildren with sweets and teaches them to do messy art. And she will still make your heart race every time you look at her. And the 60-year-old Marcus? She pretended to consider seriously. He will be even more stubborn, if that's possible. He will insist on playing the piano for all the grandchildren, even when they prefer video games. And he will still whisper, "Good morning, my star," to me, as if it were the first time. And at 80? At 80, we will sit on this same terrace, holding hands, watching our great-grandchildren play in the gardens. You will complain that they make too much noise, but you will secretly love every laugh. And I will remind you of the first time you said you loved me." "When was that again?" Eleanor nudged him playfully. "You remember perfectly. It was at the Montclair Villa, during the storm, when you finally admitted you were terrified of losing me." "Oh, that's right." Marcus pulled her closer. "But do you know when I really realized I loved you? When? At our first wedding. When you picked that ring off the floor with such dignity that you made me question everything I thought I knew about strength and courage. In that moment, something inside me whispered, 'This woman will change your life forever.' And did I? You brought me back to life, Eleanor. You taught me that a healed heart can love even more deeply than a heart that has never been wounded." They kissed there, on the piano bench, surrounded by memories of transformation and promises of a future. It was a kiss that tasted of the complete story, from pain to healing, from fear to courage, from loneliness to unconditional love. "Marcus," Eleanor murmured against his lips. "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For having been cruel on that first day." He pulled away, surprised. "What do you mean? If you had been kind from the beginning, I would have never seen your true strength. I would have never discovered that I am capable of fighting for what I want. And you would have never learned that true love is not something we receive. It is something we choose to build every day." Marcus laughed, shaking his head in admiration. 10 years of marriage, and you still surprise me. I hope to continue surprising you for the next 50 years. "Only 50. He arched an eyebrow. "I was planning on loving you for at least 100 years. 100 years might not be enough," she whispered. "Then let's start with forever and see where it takes us." Outside, the gardens of Chateau Valois slept under the French moonlight, guarding the secrets of love that had triumphed over pride, healing that had overcome pain, and hope that had proven to be stronger than any fear. In the music room, two hearts that had found each other after almost being lost forever, planned more decades of love, more children to raise, and more versions of themselves to discover. And somewhere in the memories of the chateau, the echo of cruel words, uttered 10 years ago, had completely transformed into whispers of forever that promised to extend far beyond this life, this house, this world. Because some love stories are bigger than the people who live them. Some promises are so powerful that they transform not only hearts, but entire destinies. And sometimes, just sometimes, forever is exactly how long true love needs to fully blossom. We hope this story touched your heart. If you want more inspiring narratives like this one, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And let us know in the comments what your favorite part of the story was. Thank you for watching.